Hello there, it's Austin, and today we're going to discuss this American Pale Ale. So let's get started. This pale ale starts out by gathering our water, or right around 4.8 gallons of reverse osmosis. We'll be adjusting this water with a pretty gypsum-heavy charge of brewing salts. This will help give us a crisper and more pronounced hop character from the hops we'll be dropping in a little bit later. For the fermentables, I'll be using Pale 2-Row, as well as Light Munich and Light Wheat Malt. For the specialty additions, I'll be using 8 ounces of Carapils. Altogether, with this malt bill, I was aiming for a touch sweeter and a touch more color than I would traditionally make out of an American Pale Ale. It didn't end up really being that way, but next time I can always drive that a little further by adding a bit more Munich malt. With all of my grains added to my mash, I will let it sit for about an hour at 150 degrees, stirring every 15 minutes or so, and then it's time to pull the grains out of the mash and let them drain. At this point, it's time to start the boil, which of course means adding in our first charge of hops. I'm using Centennial at the 60-minute mark, which is mainly just to contribute bitterness, but hopefully doing so in a pretty clean way. And then at the 25-minute mark or so, we'll take a quick snack break, which I had to move over to the floor because Melon was making a mess over on the couch. And at the 5-minute mark, we get to our first addition of Cascade hops. These contribute floral and citrusy and a tiny bit of spicy. They ended up contributing a good amount of fruity in this batch, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Checking our original gravity and ensuring that everything looked good, it was time to cool the wort down and transfer it into the fermenter. I pretty much didn't learn my lesson last time, so I'll be fermenting this under pressure with Y Yeast 1056 American Ale. Before the dry hops went in, I went ahead and just hooked up a ball lock valve to some tubing to make a blow-off tube. And then at the 2-day mark, it's time to add in more Cascade hops. More precisely, the other half ounce of the 1 ounce bag that I added a little earlier. I actually live pretty near the Cascade Mountains, so it was fun to get to showcase a hop that I see pretty frequently walking around. Anyways, with the dry hop added and our spunding valve hooked up and ready to go, we'll let the beer finish up fermenting for another 7 days or so. Again, it's a little hard to take samples and reliably test the gravity when you're fermenting under pressure in a keg, but I did end up pouring a little bit into my hydrometer and letting it degas for a bit before getting the final gravity, showing that we were ready to cold crash and transfer into the keg. And with the beer transferred over into the keg, it was pretty much ready to enjoy. I actually let this beer condition for a couple weeks, just with other beers on tap and other things to do, but after 3 weeks or so in the keg, it had really cleared up nicely, and our 5.8% American Pale Ale featuring Cascade hops was ready to enjoy. This pale ale was actually modeled after one of my favorite beers from where I used to live. Bonus points if you can guess which one, by the way. But the end result turned out really well. It's not too hop forward, but the hops still give a nice floral and fruity punch. Honestly, I'm getting a surprising amount of fruit from these hops. It ended up being a little lighter than my target, but it still looks pretty good and it cleared up pretty well. This beer ended up with a lot more hop flavor than hop bitterness. I'm not getting too much on the nose, but that could be that I'm outside or maybe I'm just congested right now. This definitely is not one of these pale ales that might get confused as an IPA. It's not too heavy, but it's definitely heavier than a lot of beers I've been making recently, and honestly kind of solidifies Cascade as one of my favorite hops right now. Anyways, I actually tried this side by side with one of the beers I was aiming for. They actually tasted pretty similar, which was a pretty nice result. So yeah, really solid pale ale, enjoyable. Definitely gonna make it again. Cheers! If you're looking for Melon, she is actually down here.